Facts that will mess with your perception of time. Anne Frank and Martin Luther King would be the same age if they were alive today. Queen Elizabeth and Marilyn Monroe were both the same age as well. Here they are when they were both 30 years old meeting each other. George Washington died 25 years before the first dinosaur fossil was found. George Washington did not know about the existence of dinosaurs. Woolly mammoths were still walking around the earth 1,000 years after the pyramids were built. Also, Cleopatra was alive closer in time to the moon landings than the building of the Great Pyramid. NASA was already exploring space by the time scientists could agree on how plate tectonics worked. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. Betty White is actually older than sliced bread. By the time women were allowed to vote in Switzerland, NASA had already been driving a buggy on the moon. Karl Marx, the creator of communism, wrote a letter to Abraham Lincoln congratulating him on his re-election. Oxford University existed for hundreds of years before the founding of the Aztec Empire. The fax machine was invented the same year the first wagon crossed the Oregon Trail. The Ottoman Empire still existed the second to last time the Chicago Cubs won the World Series. That means that Turkey was not founded as a country until 15 years later. Star Wars came out the same year that the last guillotine execution was used in France. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. The last known widow of a Confederate soldier from the Civil War died the same year Obama became president. Audie and William got married in 1934 when she was 19 and he was 86. She passed away in August of 2008 at 93 years old, which means she just missed when Obama became the first African-American elected president by only a couple of months. It gets crazier. It was thought that Hopkins was the last known widow of any Civil War vet until Helen Jackson went public in 2017 while she was still alive. Helen was only 17 years old when she married 93-year-old Union Civil War vet James Bolin. Her marriage was hidden for 81 years until she was planning her own funeral and realized the historical significance of her secret marriage. She died in December of 2020 at 101 years old, making her the last known widow of any Civil War vet 155 years after the end of the Civil War. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. The grandson of the 10th president of the United States of America is still alive today. John Tyler was born in 1790, which is while George Washington was serving his first term as president, and he became the 10th president in 1841. He had his son Lyon Tyler later in life with his second wife at 63 years old in 1853. Lyon also had children with his second wife later in life, having Lyon Tyler Jr. in 1924 at 71 years old, and Harrison Tyler in 1928 at 75 years old. Lyon Tyler Jr. unfortunately just passed away in September of 2020. But Harrison Tyler is still alive at 92 years old today. This means that the three generations of this family have been around for 231 years and 94% of America's entire history. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. The current oldest person living in the world today is 118 years old. She has been alive longer than the time between the date the US Constitution took effect and her birth. Stegosauruses were older to T-Rexes than T-Rexes are to us. In 1903, the New York Times wrote an editorial saying that humans would not be able to fly for 1,000,000 years. Just 2 months later, the Wright brothers took flight. There have been 14 presidents during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, and she's met 13 of them. The construction of the Eiffel Tower was completed the same year that Van Gogh painted Starry Night. The world's oldest living tree, located in California, is older than the Great Pyramid. Facts that will change your perception of time. Joe Biden once served in Congress with 6 different people born in the 1800s. Bowhead whales can live for over 200 years, which means that there are likely whales in the ocean today that were alive during the Civil War. Harvard University did not offer calculus the first few years it was established because calculus had not been invented yet. Charlie Chaplin died the same year that Apple was incorporated. From the time Pluto was discovered to the time that Pluto lost its planet status, it hadn't even completed one orbit around the sun. It actually still hasn't. Pluto was discovered in 1930 and downgraded in 2006, 76 years later. It takes Pluto 248 years to orbit the sun, which means that it will not have made a full orbit around the sun until 2178. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. If you put the universe's 13.8 billion years into a year-long timeline, here's what it looks like. The Big Bang occurs January 1st, 12 a.m. The Milky Way galaxy forms on March 16th. Our solar system takes shape September 2nd. The formation of Earth follows shortly after on September 6th. The first complex cells emerge on Earth November 9th. Dinosaurs appear on Christmas and are extinct by December 30th. All of recorded human history starts on the night of December 31st at 11:59 p.m. Jesus Christ is born at 11:59 and 55 seconds. The average human life only lasts about 1/4 of a second on this timeline, less than the blink of an eye, which is 1/3 of a second. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. Abraham Lincoln and Charles Darwin have the exact same birthday. They also were both 12 years old when Napoleon died. Betty White was 9 years old when Thomas Edison passed away. Donald Trump was alive during Stalin's reign over the USSR. Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, was already 17 years old by the time Orville Wright, one of the inventors of the airplane, had passed away. There was only a 66-year time difference between when we flew for the first time and when we landed on the moon. Pablo Picasso was actually alive more recently than Jimi Hendrix. Leonardo da Vinci was a year younger than Christopher Columbus. Woody Allen was born the same year as Elvis Presley. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. The Sahara Desert was green and alive with vegetation only about 6,000 years ago. Rosa Parks was alive long enough to witness Hurricane Katrina. If you went back the same amount of time from today as Marty did from 1985 to 1955, you'd only be traveling back to 1991. Mark Twain lived long enough to take a color photo before he passed away. Humans have only lived about 1/1000th of the time that dinosaurs did. In 2020, researchers discovered fossils of green algae that existed 1 billion years ago. The last telegram that was ever sent was in India only 8 years ago. The last major Hollywood movie to be released on VHS was A History of Violence in 2006. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. Shakespeare was still alive when the British started colonizing the Americas. Pablo Picasso lived long enough to play Pong. Nintendo was founded while Jack the Ripper was still on the loose. Microsoft was founded while Spain was still a fascist dictatorship. You could have taken the London Underground to witness the last public hanging in the United Kingdom. The first iPhone was released in the same summer that the last Harry Potter book came out. Prisoners arrived at Auschwitz just days after McDonald's was founded. The last known transatlantic slave ship to arrive in the United States was in 1860. This was 52 years after the importation of slaves was banned by Congress. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. The last believed living former slave in America died 15 days after Disney World was opened. We didn't know that a meteor killed the dinosaurs until 1991. That's around the same time that the movie Home Alone was in theaters. Starry Night was painted in the same year that Nintendo became a company. The first episode ever of Doctor Who was released the night after JFK's assassination. Harriet Tubman was still alive for another month after Rosa Parks was born. The first college football game was played only 4 years after the end of the Civil War. The Eastern Roman Empire fell only 40 years before Christopher Columbus landed in the Americas. This means that plenty of people who considered themselves Romans heard of the discovery of the New World. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. We figured out how to travel to the moon before we put wheels on suitcases. A day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus. It takes 243 Earth days for Venus to rotate once, but only 225 to orbit the sun. It took 284 years for the United States to become a country after Columbus discovered the Americas. To put that in perspective, the United States are not even 284 years old yet. That will happen in 2060. The jewelry store Tiffany & Co. was founded before Italy was a country. Frank Sinatra died the same day the Seinfeld finale aired. Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, died in 1931. This is the same year that the Empire State Building, which has thousands of light bulbs, was completed. President Hoover pressed a button from inside the White House that lit up the tower lights to officially open the building. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. While the United States was working on sending people to the moon, interracial marriage was still illegal in 16 states. Octopuses have been around for longer than the dinosaurs. It took 190 years before producers of ketchup realized that putting it in an upside-down bottle was a much better way to store it. We invented cell phones, the internet, and even green ketchup before we invented an upside-down ketchup bottle. The pyramids of Giza were as old to the ancient Romans as the ancient Romans are to us now. Paramount Studios was founded while the Ottoman Empire was still around. Will Smith is now older than the actor who played Uncle Phil was at the time that The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air first premiered in 1990. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. If a That 90s show came out the same length of time after the 90s that 70s show came out after the 70s, it would have been made in 2017. 6% of all humans who have ever lived in the entire history of humanity are alive right now. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated only months before the founding of the Secret Service. The paperwork to create the Secret Service was on Abraham Lincoln's desk the night he died. Everything you see happened in the past, not the present. It takes about 50 milliseconds for the brain to process visual information, so by the time you've actually seen something, it's already happened. Princess Diana and Mother Teresa passed away only days apart in 1997. The Brooklyn Bridge was being built during the Battle of Little Bighorn. By the time the Pilgrims had made it to Plymouth Rock, there already was a Palace of the Governors established in New Mexico by Spanish explorers. Facts that will change your perception of time. Tobey Maguire was the same age when No Way Home was released as Willem Dafoe was when the first Spider-Man premiered. We are as many years away now from Pearl Harbor as Pearl Harbor was from the start of the Civil War. If Anne Frank was still alive, she would still have been 7 years younger than Betty White was. This also means that Martin Luther King Jr. would have been 7 years younger than Betty White as well. Cream Puff is the oldest cat to have ever lived on record at 38 years and 3 days old. People born at the same moment in time can celebrate their birthdays on different days thanks to time zones. The last American to be executed by firing squad was in 2010, the same year that Toy Story 3 came out. Mauritania was the last country on Earth to legally criminalize slavery in 2007, the same year the iPhone came out. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. To give some perspective on what it was like to be alive on Earth over the last 100 years, here are some of the inventions that were created after Betty White was born. Cotton swabs, modern traffic lights, the bulldozer, the cheeseburger, sunglasses, frozen foods, the tampon, the jukebox, masking tape, the pop-up toaster, the pressure washer, the recliner, ice cube trays, bubble gum, the bow tie, the electric razor, and penicillin. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. If you are over the age of 45, the world population has doubled in your lifetime. Everything in this 1991 Radio Shack ad exists in the smartphone you're watching this video on right now. Dinosaurs roamed the earth for such a long period of time that dinosaur fossils existed while dinosaurs were still alive. King Tut started ruling Egypt as a pharaoh before he was 10 years old until he died at 19 years old. Picasso and Snoop Dogg were alive at the same time. Every single atom in your body is billions of years old. The human race has existed on Earth for only 0.004% of the Earth's entire history. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. The Lion King was released closer in time to the moon landing than today. Any American that is 81 years old has lived through more than 1/3 of the USA's entire existence. If you lived to be 100 years old, you would have to live that same life 50 million times before the sun would stop shining. The first train was invented before the first bicycle. If you were to count to 1,000,000 at the rate of one number per second, it would take about 11 days. Counting to 1,000,000,000 would take you 32 years. Counting to 1,000,000,000,000 would take more than 31,709 years. In 1958, a 96-year-old man went on a game show called I've Got a Secret. A panel of contestants would have to ask questions to try and figure out what this man's secret was. His secret was that he witnessed the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. Sharks are older than the rings of Saturn by hundreds of millions of years. If you were given $10,000 every single day since the pyramids were built, you would only have about 6% of Elon Musk's entire wealth. To give a clearer picture of the difference between a million and a billion, a million seconds ago was a little over a week ago. A billion seconds ago was the year 1990. Jimmy Carter was the first president to be born in a hospital. Obama was the first president born under the same American flag he served as president under. Harriet Tubman was born in Thomas Jefferson's lifetime and died in Reagan's. There were Greek playwrights who wrote shows nearly 2,000 years before Shakespeare was even alive. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. The first television is older than the first chocolate chip cookie. Lindsay Lohan is now older than how old the actress who played Meredith was when she was in The Parent Trap. The actor who played young Anakin is now older than how old Ewan McGregor was when he played as Obi-Wan in The Phantom Menace. We are now more removed in time from The Phantom Menace as we were the original Star Wars when Phantom Menace first was released. The first ever high five happened in 1977 when two LA Dodgers teammates were celebrating a home run. Grass didn't start growing on Earth until just before the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs hit Earth. No one knows who named Earth. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. The children from Jurassic Park are now older than the age that Laura Dern was when the movie was released. Joseph Macello is now 38 years old, and Ariana Richards is now 42 years old. Soft toilet paper only came into existence around the year 1930. It was not normal to wear a white wedding dress until Queen Victoria did it in 1840. Before this, brides would get married in any color they liked. The Tower of London is almost 400 years older than Machu Picchu. Hallways did not become popular until the 1800s. In most buildings before this, you would just flow from one room to the next. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. There is less time between Abraham Lincoln's second inauguration and Joe Biden's birth than there is between Joe Biden's birth and his own inauguration. 9/11 is closer in time to the first day CNN ever broadcasted live than today. Everyone who was born after 9/11 can now legally drink in the United States. Jalen Duren is a current NBA player who was born 3 weeks after LeBron James played his first NBA game ever. There are more than 100 current NFL players who were born after Tom Brady was drafted in the year 2000. Evidence that was discovered recently shows that Antarctica was actually a swampy rainforest inhabited by dinosaurs about 90 million years ago. The Salem witch trials began 5 years after Sir Isaac Newton published his 3 laws of motion. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. Tom Holland is now the same age that Tobey Maguire was when he first became Spider-Man. Barbie went to the moon before women were allowed to open credit cards without a male co-signer. The release of Toy Story is now closer in time to the moon landing than today. If you're a millennial, you were born closer to the moon landing than today. 75% of the time you will ever spend with your kids is gone by the time that they're 12. 90% of that time is gone by the time they're going to college. The universe might actually be 26.7 billion years old according to a recent study. This would make it nearly double the widely believed age of 13.7 billion years. From the time it was discovered to the time it lost its status as a planet, Pluto made it less than 1/3 of the way around the sun. We only recently found out that the sun was made of hydrogen and helium. Julius Caesar lived closer in time to us than he did the Great Pyramids. The last known battle involving samurai happened less than 150 years ago. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. Mean Girls is more of a classic movie today than The Breakfast Club was when Mean Girls was originally released. Rebecca Black has doubled in age since Friday was released in 2011. This is what AI video looked like just 1 year ago. And this is what AI video looks like now. Clint Eastwood's parents would not have been able to celebrate the birth of their son with a can of beer. That's because Clint Eastwood was born in 1930 and canned beer wasn't even a thing until 1935. This is Nancy Pelosi attending JFK's inauguration in 1961 as a 20-year-old. We know of bowhead whales that have lived for more than 200 years, so any bowheads that managed to live through the golden age of American whaling in the 19th century could still be swimming in the ocean today. When novels became popular in the 1700s, the media thought that young people were reading too much. They were calling it the reading rage, the reading fever, and the reading mania. The oldest currently working train engine in the world was built when slavery was still legal in the United States. Facts that will mess with your perception of time. There will be a bigger time difference between Vice City and GTA 6 than there was between World War I and World War II. The Sun Baby from Teletubbies has a baby of her own now. Joe Biden has been alive for nearly 1/3 of all of the United States history. Michael Jordan and LeBron James both lost by 44 points in their worst losses ever at the exact same age to the day. Emma Morano was the last person from the 1800s to pass away. She was born in 1899 and passed away just 7 years ago. We did not discover Antarctica until 39 years after we discovered Uranus. We live about 3 times closer to the last dinosaur than the first dinosaur and the last dinosaur did to each other. My daughter, who's going to be born this month, will be 21 years old when the next solar eclipse covers the United States. Where will you and your family be in 2045? And facts that will mess with your perception of time. This is my entire life on one chart. Each one of these black dots is equal to 1 week. And I'm about to start a new line because I'm turning 31 this week. It took me less than an hour to bubble in my entire life. And it's gonna take over 50 years to fill in this. Hopefully, if I actually live that long to fill this all up. Like, what is this? Just like another hour and a half of bubbling for my entire life remaining? Every amazing memory or every horrifying memory that I've ever had in my life is filled out right here. This is it, everything. And what I love about when I look at this is that my daughter is less than 3 weeks old, which means she's right here and has all of this life to live ahead of her. Maybe this is depressing to look at. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's making me think about it a lot. And I don't mean to be blunt, but what are you doing with your life? Are you going to be satisfied with the way that you filled out every single bubble on your own chart? If you want one of these, you can find them on Amazon really easily. Or if you buy it in the product link attached here, then you're going to support me and my family. Thank you for spending some of your time watching my videos, but now go and fill out your bubbles properly in your life.